Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. The Orpheus began its deep descent into the Challenger Deep, a journey to the unexplored abyssal plains of the Pacific. Our mission was to collect geological and biological samples from zones never before reached by human instruments. The pressure outside mounted steadily, an invisible, crushing force against the advanced hull of our submarine. Inside, the air recyclers maintained a constant atmosphere, a small bubble of human life venturing into truly alien depths. We were a crew of 9, each specialist confident in their role, prepared for the immense challenges of deep ocean exploration. Captain Varga sat forward, eyes fixed on the forward viewport, a veteran of countless dives. His presence provided steadiness. Dr. Chen, our lead biologist, prepared her sampling equipment, a quiet excitement evident in her movements. I monitored the long-range sonar and environmental sensors. As we passed the 8,000-meter mark, the external cameras began to capture images of marine life unlike anything catalogued. Bioluminescent organisms pulsed with colors that defied known spectrums, drifting past the viewports, each a point of light. We saw creatures with multiple sets of eyes, some on stalks, some glowing with an internal light. Their forms were fluid, their movements economical, perfectly adapted to the crushing darkness and immense cold. Dr. Chen recorded every detail, her voice a rapid commentary into her console microphone, cataloging species that would rewrite textbooks. One creature, a colossal gelatinous form, drifted slowly, its translucent body shifting with internal light. It was several times the size of any known deep-sea invertebrate. Its presence caused a brief collective intake of breath from the crew. Hours into our descent, well below 10,000 meters, a new sensation permeated the Orpheus. A distinct, rhythmic tapping began against the port side of the hull. It was not random noise from the abyssal currents or shifting rock. It was a clear, deliberate pattern, 3 short, 1 long, 3 short, 1 long, repeated regularly. My eyes went to the internal pressure gauges, then to the external cameras, but nothing was visible. The tapping did not register on the external hydrophones, only directly through the structure of the hull. Captain Varga straightened in his command chair. "Source?" Captain Varga asked, his voice low and firm. I checked my instruments again. "Captain, the structural sensors indicate direct contact, but no external acoustic signature. Nothing visible on the cameras." The knocking continued, an insistent pulse vibrating through the deck plates. Engineer Reyes moved to the forward sonar station, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the diagnostics. Dr. Chen paused her biological observations, her attention drawn by the sound. She pressed a hand against the wall, her expression thoughtful. Then Sonar Chief Alvarez spoke, his voice carrying an edge of urgency. "Captain, I have a contact. It is massive, too large for any known marine organism. Range 1.5 kilometers, bearing 030. The main screen flickered, displaying the sonar return. A colossal, amorphous shape appeared. Its size far exceeded the Orpheus outline. It was not a solid, defined mass, but a dispersed yet coherent entity on the display. It moved slowly, a vast shadow passing through the deep, its contours indistinct. The rhythmic knocking intensified slightly, echoing the new presence. "What is it, Alvarez?" Captain Varga demanded. "No identifiable characteristics, Captain," Alvarez replied, his fingers flying across his console. "Its density readings are inconsistent with rock or known biological structures. It is spread out, but has a definite core." The implications settled over the bridge. We were no longer simply exploring the depths. We had encountered something immense, outside our understanding. The scientific mission now took on a different, serious aspect, transforming from exploration to confrontation with an entity that challenged every assumption about life in the abyss. We watched the screen, the rhythmic knocking a constant reminder of the presence that now shared our silent, crushing world. The rhythmic knocking continued, a relentless reminder that the colossal sonar contact still lingered outside the hull. Hours passed, marked by tense silence broken only by the ship's internal systems and our hushed conversations. Captain Varga ordered a full lockdown of all non-essential compartments, and the crew initiated a phased system check, hoping to pinpoint the source of the persistent tapping. Engineer Reyes, a thorough and meticulous man, volunteered to inspect the auxiliary power conduits in Section Gamma, a compartment usually sealed during deep dives. He confirmed the integrity of the hatch seal as he entered, his voice clear over the comms. An hour later, when he did not respond to comms check, a cold knot formed in my stomach. Captain Varga tried again, his voice sharpening with each unanswered call. Reyes, report. Do you read me? There was only static. Captain Varga then ordered a breach team to Section Gamma. I joined the team with Dr. Chen and Sonar Chief Alvarez, our steps quick and quiet along the deck plates. The air grew colder as we approached the access corridor. The outer hatch to Section Gamma was still secured, its heavy clamps sealed. Alvarez manually cycled the emergency override, the hydraulics hissing as the massive door groaned open. The lights inside the compartment flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Reyes was not there. The space was empty. His toolkit lay abandoned on a workbench, its instruments scattered. His comms headset was on the floor, discarded next to a faint boot print. "He's gone," Dr. Chen whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes widened as she pointed to the bulkhead next to Reyes's workstation. There, adhering to the metal, was a patch of iridescent, translucent film. It shimmered with a subtle inner light about the size of a human hand. The film pulsed softly, a barely perceptible rhythm. I reached out a gloved finger, but Captain Varga stopped me. "Do not touch it," he commanded, his voice tight. "Chen, identify that." Dr. Chen moved closer, activating a portable scanner. Her readings appeared on a small wrist-mounted display. Her face, usually so calm and analytical, paled as she reviewed the data. "Captain, this is not a material from the Orpheus. It is organic. A colonial organism." She zoomed in on the film with the scanner, displaying an intricate crystalline structure. "It responds to thermal energy, Captain. It appears to seek out heat gradients moving along them." "How did it get in here?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. The compartment was sealed. There was no breach. Dr. Chen looked up, her gaze sweeping over the intricate network of pipes and conduits crisscrossing the compartment. "It moves through contact, Captain, not by breaching the hull externally. It travels through energy fields, through electrical pathways and thermal convection currents. It is inside the ship. It has been inside the ship." Her last words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. The realization hit us all with crushing force. Reyes had not simply vanished from a sealed room. He had been taken by something that could move through the very structure of our submarine, something that was already a part of our isolated world. The rhythmic knocking from outside no longer felt like a distant threat but a prelude. The genuine threat was now here, within our walls. The illusion of safety shattered. My breath hitched in my throat. I glanced at Alvarez and Varga, their faces drawn and etched with a new, terrifying comprehension. We were trapped in a metal coffin, miles beneath the surface, and the Predator was already on board, indistinguishable from the ship's internal systems. There was nowhere left to hide. The rhythmic knocking, once a distant echo, now originated from within the Orpheus. It came from the bulkhead behind my station, then from the deck plates beneath my feet, then from the ceiling panels above. The sound vibrated through the very structure of the submarine, a constant, insistent pulse that burrowed into our bones. With this internal knocking came a pervasive harmonic hum, a low-frequency resonance that infiltrated every compartment. It felt less like a sound and more like a pressure against my eardrums, a deep throb that blurred the edges of my vision. Our thoughts became a struggle, fragmented and difficult to hold. Conversations faltered as words evaporated from our minds. We found ourselves staring blankly at consoles, struggling to recall simple procedures, our hands often pausing mid-air. The ship's internal temperature also began to climb, an oppressive warmth adding to the growing disorientation. Sonar Chief Alvarez, usually precise and alert, began to exhibit disturbing symptoms. His movements grew erratic, his fingers fumbling over his console. He spoke less, often retreating into himself, his eyes unfocused, as if listening to something only he could hear. His posture became rigid, his shoulders hunched forward. One cycle, as I reviewed external sensor logs, Alvarez began to speak. His words formed a guttural cadence, clicking sounds interspersed with tones. These tones were elongated and drawn out, mirroring the pervasive resonance filling the Orpheus. His face was slack, his gaze distant, and a strange smile touched his lips. Captain Varga called his name, but Alvarez did not respond, instead continuing his alien monologue, his voice rising and falling with the ship's internal vibration. He reached out to touch the console screen, his fingers tracing patterns that were not there. The Orpheus shuddered then, a violent tremor shaking us in our seats. The primary lights dimmed to an emergency glow, casting long shadows across the control room. Alarm klaxons blared before dying out completely, leaving only the internal knocking and the pervasive sound. "Power systems are failing," Dr. Chen shouted, her voice strained. "Auxiliary systems are offline. Life support is stable but at minimum output. The air is thinning." I scanned my own diagnostics, a cold dread tightening my chest. The forward thrusters were unresponsive, our ability to maneuver gone. Main ballast pumps were seizing. We were losing all control over the ship's movement. The Orpheus began a slow, uncontrolled descent, deeper into the abyss. "Captain, we cannot ascend," I reported, my voice hollow. "Engines are unresponsive. Ballast tanks are venting erratically. We are trapped at this depth, falling further." Captain Varga, his face grim, rose from his command chair. He looked at each of us, his gaze unwavering, and I saw a flicker of the old resolve return to the remaining crew members. "Our primary mission has changed," he stated, his voice cutting through the pervasive sound. "Escape is no longer an option. Our only remaining purpose is to ensure the mission data transmission reaches headquarters. We will compile every bit of research, every sensor log, every observation. That is all that matters now. That is what we will achieve." He turned back to his console, his hands moving with renewed determination. The internal knocking continued, the pervasive resonance pressing down on us. But Captain Varga's words instilled a singular focus. We were no longer fighting for our lives, but for the completion of our mission, the last act of human endeavor in this crushing abyss. The Orpheus would be lost, but our data would reach the surface. We worked without speaking, a collective determination driving our numb fingers across the consoles. The pervasive sound vibrated through the Orpheus, a deep internal resonance that replaced the air in our lungs, our own thoughts becoming echoes within its vastness. Captain Varga ordered us to prioritize the core mission data, every byte of scientific observation, every sensor log from the descent. Dr. Chen, her movements slow but precise, continued to record environmental samples, documenting the ship's internal temperature and atmospheric changes. I focused on the external camera feeds, compiling the last images of the abyssal plane. As I monitored the forward viewport, a new development unfolded outside the Orpheus. The colossal entity, previously an amorphous shape on sonar, began to coalesce. It moved with an impossible fluidity, expanding and thinning into vast, translucent sheets that drifted towards the submarine. These sheets shimmered with an internal light, a pale luminescence that began to envelop the Orpheus. They stretched, clinging to the hull, like an immense living membrane. The viewport darkened as the first layers pressed against the glass, obscuring our view of the abyss. Soon, the entire outer shell of the Orpheus was encased within this vast living envelope, a second skin of biological material fusing with our metal hull. It covered the thrusters, the sensors, the escape hatches, sealing us completely within its grasp. The internal sound intensified then, no longer just a resonance, but a permeating presence. It felt like a warm, thick liquid filling the control room, pressing against our skin, entering our bodies. Our individual voices, our very thoughts, began to blend into this overwhelming current. I felt my own consciousness begin to dissolve, my sense of self blurring, my perceptions merging with the ship's vibrations, with the pervasive sound that was now everything. Dr. Chen still sat at her console, her hands poised above the keys, but her eyes were wide and distant. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Captain Varga remained upright in his chair, his gaze fixed on the forward display, his resolve now absorbed into the greater internal rhythm. Our distinct thoughts, our human fears and hopes, were no longer separate. They became part of a single vast awareness, an assimilation into the entity that now surrounded and permeated us. The last of the mission data packets was transmitted, a ghost signal rising from the crushing depths, carrying the final moments of our expedition to the surface. It was a complete data stream, containing every observation, every scientific finding, every log from our journey into the unknown. Days later, back at headquarters, the mission scientists received the data. The transmission was perfect, a pristine stream of information confirming the incredible discoveries of the Orpheus expedition. However, there was no accompanying communication, no final report from Captain Varga, no voice messages from the crew. The automated systems registered no anomalies, only the successful upload of data. Concern grew into alarm when repeated attempts to establish contact with the Orpheus failed. A deep-sea search mission was quickly mobilized, its vessels departing for the Pacific Trench, their hydrophones scanning the crushing depths for any sign of the advanced submarine. They searched the vast, empty expanse of the abyss, unaware of the profound transformation that had taken place, unaware that the Orpheus and its crew were now one with the immense, silent horror that awaited them. I am disappearing now. My body feels like it is unweaving itself strand by strand, and my spirit stretches thin, about to vanish completely. No one sees me now, not truly, and soon there will be nothing left for them to see at all. This erosion began the night they came, a night that violently tore my world apart and started this feeling of being gone. It was a Tuesday night, I remember the precise date, and I had just fallen asleep in my own bed when the sound of shattering glass ripped through the house. My eyes snapped open instantly, fear gripping my chest, and I heard heavy boots stomping down the hallway towards my room. The door crashed inward with a splintering sound, and 3 large men stood there, their faces hidden by dark masks, their movements swift and practiced. One of them moved quickly to my bedside, a cloth pressed against my mouth and nose before I could even scream. A sweet chemical smell filled my head, burning my nostrils, and the room spun, then darkened. I woke to darkness, my head throbbing with a dull ache and the sensation of being jostled violently. My hands were bound tightly behind my back, and my mouth was gagged with a harsh cloth. The air was cold, biting, carrying the stale smell of diesel and damp metal. I lay on the floor of what felt like a truck bed, moving fast, the vibrations rattling through my bones. I heard no voices, only the engine's roar and the tires squeal against the road. The journey continued for a long time, my body growing stiff and numb from the constant motion. At some point, the truck hit something hard, and my head slammed against a metal surface. A searing pain exploded behind my eyes, and a warm liquid trickled down my temple. I must have lost consciousness again, for the next thing I knew, I was lying on a cold, hard surface, no longer moving. My head still pulsed with pain, but a new terror gripped me. Bright lights glared down from above, blinding me, and the air carried a sterile chemical scent. My vision cleared to reveal an operating table beneath me, my limbs secured with straps. Around me, glinting under the harsh lights, lay an array of surgical tools, scalpels, clamps, saws, and needles, all arranged with precision. The figures around me wore medical scrubs, their faces obscured by surgical masks and caps, and they moved with a purposeful intention. The bright lights above intensified, pinning me to the operating table, and a screen descended into my view. It flickered to life, showing my home, a place of comfort now engulfed in orange flames. The roof caved in with a shower of sparks, and smoke billowed into the dark sky, a black column against the distant streetlights. I watched, helpless and strapped down, as the familiar structure crumbled, becoming a pyre of everything I knew. The memory of my parents inside, their laughter, their quiet conversations, twisted into a knot of dread in my stomach. The video ended, replaced by static. Then a new image appeared, one that froze my blood and stole my breath. My parents lay on a cold slab, their forms distorted and desecrated. My mother's once kind face was marred, a gaping wound where her right eye had been. My father's jaw was unhinged, revealing teeth, and his skin was flayed in places, revealing muscle and bone. Their clothes were torn, singed, and their bodies were still, unnaturally so. It was them, yet it was not. A grotesque parody of the people who had loved me. A doctor moved into my field of vision, holding a scalpel, its blade glinting under the lights. My head throbbed, and a scream built in my throat, but the gag held it captive. The metal touched my skin. A cold, precise line traced across my forehead, just beneath my hairline. A sharp, burning pain followed, immediate and intense, tearing through my nerves. I thrashed against the straps, my body convulsing, but they held me fast. No numbing, no release, just the raw agony of the blade cutting deeper. The doctor's movements were unhurried, his hands steady as he peeled back the skin from my temples. I felt every tug, every slice, the tearing sensation as my own flesh separated from the underlying muscle and bone. Warm blood welled up, pouring over my eyes, temporarily blinding me, mixing with hot tears of terror and anguish. I tasted copper in my mouth. The scent of blood filled my nostrils, and the room became a dizzying kaleidoscope of pain and despair. Another doctor joined the first, their tools clicking and scraping with chilling precision. They worked in tandem, a synchronized dance of destruction, stripping away my features piece by piece. My eyelids were lifted, stretched, then cut away. My nose was sectioned, removed. The skin of my cheeks was meticulously peeled back, revealing the structures underneath. The pain was a living entity, an overwhelming force that consumed my entire being, leaving no room for thought or memory, only the relentless, searing torment. My body screamed, but no sound escaped my bound mouth. I felt consciousness begin to fray, dipping in and out, the world blurring into a red haze of agony. They did not stop, even as my senses failed. I felt them working on my jaw, my lips, the sharp, tearing sensation as my mouth was remade. Then came a new horror. I felt pieces being attached, sutured to my raw, exposed face. The skin felt different, colder, thicker in some places, thinner in others. I could feel the texture of it, the coarse, dead feel against my own living, pulsing flesh. It was my mother's cheek, I realized, through the pain, grafted onto my own, her eye socket crudely reshaped and joined to my own brow. Then came a section of my father's jaw, a piece of his ravaged mouth sewn to mine. Each stitch was a fresh spike of pain, binding the dead to the living, creating a monstrous tableau. They were building me a new face, a grotesque mosaic of desecrated flesh, binding me forever to the horror they had inflicted. It was not a face, but a twisted experiment, a chilling, deliberate act of creation and destruction, reshaping my identity into an unrecognizable abomination. The process continued, relentless and unflinching, until the last suture was pulled tight, and I lay there, no longer me. The darkness returned, a welcome oblivion after the torturous creation of my new face. When I next surfaced, it was to the jarring sensation of being flung from a moving vehicle. My body struck the ground hard, rolling down a short embankment into thorny bushes. The chill of the night air seeped into my battered bones, and the smell of damp earth filled my nostrils. My new face felt tight and agonizing, a mask stretched and stiff, burning with a dull, constant ache. I touched it cautiously, my fingers finding rough sutures and unfamiliar contours. I pushed myself up, my muscles protested, and began to walk. Each step was a struggle, my body weakened, my mind reeling from the horror. The road stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of asphalt leading into the pre-dawn gloom. Hours later, as the sun began its ascent, coloring the sky pale, I found myself in the outskirts of a small town. A bulletin board stood near a general store, covered with various notices. My eyes fell upon a familiar image, a photograph of my old self, smiling, vibrant. It was a missing persons poster, my name emblazoned beneath the picture. Hope surged through me, a desperate, fleeting emotion. I reached out a trembling hand, tracing the contours of my lost face. People walked by, their gazes sweeping over me, then past me, their expressions indifferent. A woman pushing a stroller glanced at the poster, then at me, her eyes lingering on my disfigured features with a flicker of revulsion before she hurried away, pulling her child closer. No one recognized the person in the poster standing there. No one saw me. I tried to speak, to utter my name, to explain the monstrous transformation. My voice emerged as a garbled croak, the new arrangement of my mouth making coherent speech almost impossible. When I did manage a broken sentence, people recoiled, their faces twisting in disgust or fear. They pointed, whispered, their words tearing at my already shattered spirit. "Look at that face," one man muttered. "She's out of her mind." Another called for help, not for me, but to protect others from my presence. A police officer arrived, his gaze assessing, suspicious. He questioned me, his clipped, impatient words met with blank stares, then pity, then a chilling certainty in his eyes. He wrote something on a pad, his pen scratched loudly. I was taken away, confined within stark white walls. The doctors here wore different uniforms, their expressions practiced pity. They spoke of delusions, trauma-induced psychosis, a break from reality. My pleas were interpreted as symptoms, my struggles as evidence of my madness. My new face, that grotesque mosaic of flesh, was no longer a secret horror, but a visible, undeniable affliction. It was a permanent, agonizing mask, a constant reminder of what had been taken and what had been done, burning with an incessant ache, drawing stares and whispers. I exist here now, a trapped presence behind this monstrous facade. Each day blurred, defined by clattering trays, soft padding of nurses' shoes, and the crushing weight of anonymity. Yet, in the darkest corners of my mind, a fragile hope persists. I cling to the desperate hope that one day someone will look past this reconstructed horror, past the diagnosis, and truly see the person I once was, screaming beneath this skin, waiting to be believed, waiting to be found. I walked past cluttered tables at the yard sale, searching for nothing in particular. My eyes caught on an old film camera sitting among forgotten trinkets. Its black body carried a thin layer of grit, and the lens was clouded with age. I picked it up, feeling the cold weight of the metal. A woman approached, smiling. She said it was a good camera, a classic. "There's still a roll inside," she added. "Never got around to developing it myself." A spark ignited in my mind. The idea of forgotten images, snapshots from someone else's past, felt compelling. I handed her the money. The camera already felt like a secret in my hand. I wondered about the pictures hidden within its plastic shell, thinking what could be waiting on that film. I found a photography shop on Elm Street, its window filled with faded portraits. The man behind the counter accepted the camera with a nod when I explained I wanted the roll processed. A day passed without incident. I had almost forgotten about the camera and its hidden images. The phone rang late the next afternoon. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize. I answered the call. A man's voice, tight with a noticeable tremor, introduced himself as Mr. Henderson from Elm Street Photos. His tone was not just professional, it carried a seriousness. "I developed your film," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "But there's something you need to see. The pictures, they are of your apartment. I am certain." My heart gave a sudden jerk against my ribs. I remember standing there, holding the phone, my mind struggling to process his statement. He spoke again, urging me to come in at once. The drive to the shop felt like a blur. Mr. Henderson spread the first few prints across the counter. The images were clear. There was my kitchen, the chipped mug by the sink, the magnet collection on the refrigerator door. Next was my living room, the worn armchair, the pile of books on the coffee table. These were my familiar spaces, captured with an unsettling clarity. Mr. Henderson watched me closely as I picked up the next prints. The earlier pictures had shown my living room from a straightforward standing angle, showing the couch and the window. Now the perspective shifted. One image showed the same room, but the lens angled sharply down from near the ceiling in a corner, capturing the entire space in a wide, distorted view. It was a viewpoint impossible for someone to achieve without being suspended above the room. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I flipped to the next photo. It was a close-up of my bedside lamp, the woven texture of the shade clearly visible. The angle was low, as if taken from the floor beside my bed. The next picture showed the stack of books on my nightstand, the titles clear, the page marker visible in one. The frame was tight, focused on the worn covers. I moved on. The bathroom mirror stared back at me in another print, reflecting only the wall behind it. The camera must have been inches from the glass, pointed directly into it. The images were not random snapshots. They felt deliberate. Each picture drew me deeper into a growing dread. The camera seemed to move, navigating my home. There was a shot taken from inside my open closet, looking out at the bedroom. Then a picture of the kitchen counter, but from inside the pantry, through the barely ajar door. The angles became more precise, more intimate, depicting a presence that had explored every part of my private space. These were not generic room shots. They were taken from positions no invited guest would ever occupy, from places that suggested silent, careful observation. The focus was always sharp, the framing deliberate. It was as if a silent observer had meticulously documented their journey through my home. I reached for the last photograph. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted it from the counter. This picture was different from all the others. It was a close-up of skin. Pores were clear, and fine hairs were visible on a cheek. It took a moment for my mind to register what I was seeing. Then a jolt went through me. This was my face. I recognized the slight mole near my temple, the curve of my jawline. The photograph had been taken directly above me, capturing me as I slept in my bed. My gaze dropped to the bottom edge of the print where a small white timestamp was embedded. The numbers glowed starkly. XX, 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 XX. I had bought the camera on March 15th. This picture was taken 3 nights before I ever held the camera in my hands. I lived alone in that apartment. No one else had a key. No one else was ever in my home when I was asleep. The cold certainty solidified. Someone had been in my room, standing over me, taking my picture as I slept. The camera, that dusty object, had recorded it all. It was a violation, an impossible invasion now before my eyes, captured on film. Terror seized me, absolute and inexplicable, leaving me utterly exposed within my own home. My headphones delivered a steady beat directly into my ears, blocking the sounds of Mr. Harrison's monotone lecture and the shuffling of feet in the classroom. I stared at my textbook, the calculus problems blurring into meaningless symbols, and focused on the music. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, warming my arm where it rested on the desk. A rhythm started, barely audible at first, then insistent, cutting through the bass line of my song. It was not part of the music. I pulled one headphone cup away from my ear. The classroom sounds returned, sharper. It was clapping. Everyone clapped, a slow, synchronized beat. My classmates, all 30 of them, clapped their hands together in perfect unison. Mr. Harrison clapped too, his chalk still grasped in his right hand. Their faces were empty. No smile, no frown, just blankness. The clapping continued, a relentless, unnatural sound. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on no single point. A girl in the front row, Sarah, started scratching her arm. Her nails dragged down her skin, leaving red marks. She did not flinch. Others began to mimic her. They scratched their faces, their necks, their arms. Blood welled up beneath their fingernails, but they continued to clap, their hands growing red. The sound of their hands striking together filled the room, a wet, smacking noise. Mr. Harrison raised his hand, still clapping, and brought it down hard on his desk. Once, twice. A deep crack appeared in the wooden surface. No one spoke. Their movements were precise and coordinated, and they were terrifying. My heart hammered against my ribs. I watched them, unable to move. Their hands froze in midair, blood dripping from their fingertips onto the desks. The wet smacking stopped at once. 30 sets of eyes, vacant and wide, turned towards me. A sound began, not a single voice, but a chorus woven from every throat in the room. It was not loud, but it filled the space, vibrating through the floor and up my legs. Humanity is fragile, the voices chanted, a cold, flat declaration. Too much feeling, too much thought. We offer clarity. We offer control. My breath hitched. The terror deepened, twisting my stomach. This was an invasion, a complete takeover. Reuben sat 3 rows in front of me, his head drooping. He was one of them, his hand still stained with blood, but his body twitched, a subtle tremor. For a fraction of a second, his eyes darted towards me, a flicker of awareness passing through the blankness. Hope, sharp and desperate, surged through me. He was still in there. I had to get him out. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Every head snapped towards me. The collective voice stopped its chanting, replaced by a low, guttural growl that reverberated around the room. I took a step forward, then another, moving towards Reuben. "Reuben," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Reuben, can you hear me?" His head twitched again. His hands rose, his bloody fingers reaching for his ears, as if trying to block the unseen force. A wave of anger, pure and primal, washed over the others. They lurched forward, a unified mass, their vacant eyes fixed on me. Panic seized me. I could not fight them all. I could not save him here. I turned and ran. I ripped open the classroom door, slamming it against the wall, and sprinted down the deserted hallway. Their collective growl followed me, echoing through the empty corridor. My footsteps pounded on the linoleum, a frantic rhythm against the growing dread. I did not look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, until I burst through the main exit doors and into the weak afternoon light. The air outside offered no relief. A cacophony of voices erupted around me, overwhelming the sounds of the distant city traffic. The same cold, flat declaration: humanity is fragile, broadcast from every streetlight, every parked car's infotainment system, every distant phone vibrating in someone's pocket. It was everywhere. The collective voice was no longer confined to the classroom. It had spread. The world itself was speaking. I stumbled through our front door. Reuben slumped against me. His breathing was shallow, a rattling sound in his chest. His eyes, clouded with that blankness, showed red from where he had clawed at himself. He had collapsed on the sidewalk a block from school, bleeding and shivering. I pulled him home. The collective voice followed us, radiating from every device we passed. A constant chorus. Humanity is fragile, it repeated. We offer clarity. We offer control. I laid Reuben on the living room rug. He groaned, a weak sound. His fingers twitched. I looked around for help. My father's study door was open. He spent most of his time in there, lost in his screens. I pushed the door further open. The room glowed from half a dozen monitors. They displayed shifting code lines, satellite maps with red dots, and news feeds showing global chaos. What froze me was the central screen. It showed a network diagram, a vast web of connections with a single pulsing node. Below it was my father's username, Architect Prime. My father sat at his desk, his back to me. His fingers moved fast across a keyboard. "Dad?" I whispered. He did not turn. His head remained fixed on the screens. Reuben let out a strangled cry from the living room. It was a sound of agony. My father's fingers paused. He leaned closer to the monitor. The red dots on the global map brightened, expanding. "It's working," my father murmured, his voice filled with satisfaction. "The dissemination is complete. Soon no mind will be untouched, no will unbroken." I stepped into the room. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice trembling. He finally turned, a slow movement. His eyes, usually tired, now gleamed with fanatic intensity. "I am saving them, Riona," he said, his voice calm. "Humanity was a flawed design, a messy experiment. I am refining it, building something better." Reuben coughed, a ragged sound. He lifted his head. His eyes, still distant, flickered with understanding. He looked directly at me. With great effort, he forced out words. The world, his grand design." He gasped, his body convulsing, then went still. His eyes glazed over. My father smiled, a detached expression. He looked back at his screens, at the red map. The collective voice, now deafening, echoed from every corner of the house, every corner of the world. A new dawn, it chanted. A new beginning. My father had remade the world. He had ended humanity. The first breath tore through my throat, a ragged, painful pull of air into empty lungs. I gasped again, a frantic sound lost within an absolute darkness that pressed in from every side. There was no light, not a glimmer, and my eyes felt useless, wide open but seeing nothing. My head ached with a dull pain that throbbed, a residue of something I could not recall. Panic grew quickly, a cold sensation tightening in my stomach as I struggled to orient myself within the oppressive void. My hands flew up, searching, and met rough surfaces. I pushed, but the space around me felt confined and small. Then came the sounds, soft at first, then growing clearer. Desperate coughs, muffled whimpers, a choked sob. Others. I was not alone here. Shared terror filled the space, a palpable presence within the oppressive darkness. I heard hurried breathing close by, sharp inhalations and shaky exhalations. A sudden loud cry erupted nearby, resounding in the blackness and sending a jolt of intense dread through my body. I tried to speak, but only a dry, harsh sound escaped my lips. My voice, my memory, my very existence felt alien, detached. I reached out again, fingers brushing against damp, cold skin. Someone else was there, shivering, their body pressed against mine in the cramped space. They flinched away with a gasp of their own, and I recoiled. We were all trapped. Each of us returned from an unknowable nothingness into this present horror. This was not living, not a true existence. This was something else entirely, a state of being resurrected into an enduring horror, with no explanation and no escape. The darkness continued to press in, but now it felt different, heavy with a growing dread as whispers started to circulate among us. A voice, hoarse and thin, rose above the others, carrying the first shards of understanding. "They call it the host," the person said, their words trembling slightly. "This is the place of the unending return, a cycle we are all trapped within." The air thickened with unspoken questions, but the answers, when they came, offered no comfort. We learned about the host, a collective, ancient intelligence that permeated this entire existence, and our own bodies were merely shells, borrowed and maintained by its will. Our lives, or this semblance of living, were not truly ours. The host held us together, limb by limb, organ by organ, in a fragile state of being. The reason for our unnatural existence was simple, brutal, and inescapable. Once a year, there was a day of reckoning, a gruesome tradition known only as Thanksgiving. This annual ritual demanded human sacrifices. The host required a continuous supply of vital energy to prevent its own slow decay, and our continued bodily integrity depended entirely on these offerings. Without the regular sacrifices, our borrowed forms would begin to unravel. The process was slow and agonizing. First, the skin would crack, then muscle would atrophy, and finally, bone would simply crumble into dust. The person speaking described it with a chilling clarity, as if recounting a nightmare they had lived many times over. Each of us was caught in this horrifying bargain. We were resurrected only to become custodians of this horrifying pact, tasked with ensuring the host's needs were met, or else face a dissolution far worse than any death we had previously known. Our only way to avoid absolute, agonizing obliteration was to perpetuate the very horror that sustained us. The day of Thanksgiving arrived, a coldness clinging to the air around us. We stood gathered in the large space where the sacrifices took place. The captives, their eyes wide and full of fear, were bound to rough wooden posts. Their quiet pleas had already begun to cease. We, The ones brought back watched with a grim, steady gaze, each of us understanding the immense price of any delay. Then Kayla moved. She was one of us, a quiet woman, but her actions now broke the established routine. She stepped away from our lines, rushing towards the bound figures. Before any of us could react, she cut their ropes, freeing one person, then another. A desperate scramble started as the released captives tried to run. Their movements were clumsy and eager. Our leaders shouted, their voices filled with sudden, raw terror. The host responded immediately. An undeniable force swept through the space, its presence felt without sound or form. Kayla was the first. Her skin began to crack, thin lines appearing across her face, then her arms. A gasp tore from her throat as she crumpled. Her muscles beneath the splitting skin withered, shrinking, pulling tight against her bones. A horrifying sound, a dry, crumbling rustle filled the air as her very substance began to fall away. Her body lost all form, disintegrating into a pile of fine, gray dust on the cold floor. Her screams stopped as her mouth turned to dust, but it did not stop with her. The host's retribution extended beyond the one who dared to defy. The released captives, still stumbling towards the exits, screamed as the same fate seized them. Their bodies convulsed, their skin flaked away in sheets, and their bones crumbled. The air filled with the dry, awful sound of human forms turning into dust. Some of our own, those who had hesitated, whose faces showed doubt, or who had moved too slowly to stop Kayla, were also caught in the wave. They too began to unravel, their bodies twisting into grotesque shapes before collapsing into the same gray particles. I watched it happen, the smell of dust and something metallic rising into my nostrils. The horror was complete, a brutal demonstration of the Pact's unbreakable power. The space, moments before filled with living, struggling beings, was now littered with piles of human dust, a stark testament to the unforgiving will that governed our wretched existence. The gray dust of Kayla and the others remained, a stark, flat layer across the cold floor. It was a physical reminder of the truth we now understood with absolute clarity. My breath still caught in my chest, not from fear anymore, but from the cold realization of what we truly were. We were not alive in any real sense, nor were we reborn into a new existence. This form, these thoughts, this memory, they were all temporary constructs, fragile and easily dismantled by the very power that assembled them. The host did not give us life, it merely held us together, piece by piece, an ongoing act of will against disintegration. Each pulse in my veins, each beat of my heart, was a borrowed sensation, a gift that could be revoked at any moment. Kayla's defiant act had shown the horrifying mechanism of our existence. She had tried to stop the ritual, and the immediate consequence was her absolute erasure. Her choice led to an annihilation, not just for her, but for others. A brutal demonstration of the Pact. There was no escaping this reality. We existed only because the host permitted it, and the host permitted it only when its demands were met. The annual Thanksgiving was not a choice. It was the fundamental law of our continued being. To resist meant an end worse than death, a dissolution into nothingness that I had witnessed firsthand. The memory of bodies turning to dust caused my own flesh to tighten, a primal rejection of that complete undoing. I looked at the remaining figures around me, their faces grim, their eyes reflecting the same cold understanding. No one spoke of mercy or defiance anymore. The lesson was complete. The cycle had to continue. The next Thanksgiving would arrive, and we would ensure its completion. This grim truth settled deep within me, cold and unyielding. It was a terrifying burden, yet it was also the only path away from oblivion. My purpose was clear now. Stripped of all doubt, we would survive at any cost. I was enjoying my pasta and a glass of wine with Tony when an agonizing pain exploded in my stomach. I gasped, dropping my fork onto the plate with a clatter. The pain intensified, a searing agony that made me double over and clutch my abdomen. A raw scream tore from my throat. Tony's face went white and he jumped up, knocking over his chair. He shouted my name, his voice filled with terror. The apartment door burst open and our neighbors rushed in, drawn by my screams. Tony was already pulling me towards the door, desperate to get me help. The world tilted and blurred as they carried me, the pain consuming everything until I lost consciousness in the darkness. I woke slowly to an absence of pain, a profound peace settling over me. Tony was smiling down, his hand warm in mine, and the morning sun streamed through a large window. This was our home, a beautiful house filled with soft light and quiet joy. Every day was a blessing, a gentle unfolding of happiness. We spent our mornings drinking coffee on the wide porch, planning our perfect days. Our love deepened with each passing season, a steady, warm current between us. We married in a small ceremony under an old oak tree, our vows spoken with certainty. Then came the children, a boy and a girl, filling our home with laughter and tiny footsteps. Their innocent faces brought a new kind of joy, a constant reminder of our perfect life together. Years flowed by, each one richer than the last. Everything felt real, utterly complete and beautiful. The perfect dream abruptly ended with a jarring lurch. My eyes snapped open, a harsh light piercing through the sterile white of a room I did not know. The steady sound of machines filled the cold air with its rhythm. 3 figures stood near my bed, doctors in their white coats, their faces serious. A woman with kind eyes leaned closer. She spoke, her voice soft and clear. "You are awake. You have been in an induced coma for 6 weeks." The words spun in my head. A wave of confusion washed over me. I tried to push myself up, but my body felt heavy and weak. "Tony," I managed. My voice was raspy and thin. "Where is Tony? Is he all right?" The doctor looked at the 2 others. Their gazes were unreadable, their expressions carefully blank. No one spoke. They simply stood there, their eyes fixed on me. The lack of their response and the way they watched me sent a deep unease through me. The kind-eyed doctor finally broke the unsettling silence. "We have something difficult to tell you," she began, her voice gentle yet serious. "You were poisoned." My stomach clenched with cold dread. "Poisoned?" "A slow-acting substance was administered to you over time," she explained. "It began before your arrival here and continued after your admission." The other doctor added, "We believe the person responsible for this was Tony." A sharp denial rose in my throat, but no sound came out. "Tony? He was here every day," the first doctor continued, her gaze unwavering. "We observed him manipulating your intravenous lines on several occasions, adding substances when he believed he was unobserved." The horror began to crystallize. "Your condition worsened during his constant presence," she stated, her voice now firm. "We only saw a marked improvement in your health after we restricted his access. Your recovery truly began after he was entirely removed from the hospital." The brutal truth hit me with sickening force. "His actions were deliberate," she concluded. "He intended to end your life." The relentless wail of sirens ripped through the morning, pulling me from sleep. I looked out my window and saw the flashing blue and red lights spill over Temble Terrace, giving the familiar houses an unnatural, urgent tremor. Neighbors stepped from their doorways, their faces still and uncomprehending as they watched the activity. Yellow tape already marked a wide perimeter at the street's far end, near Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning rose bushes. Police vehicles and ambulances lined the curb, their presence a stark, intrusive block against the usual morning calm. Emergency personnel moved with a focused, almost hushed urgency, avoiding eye contact with the gathering residents. I watched paramedics covering shapes on the ground, their movements precise and practiced. A cold knot formed deep inside my stomach, tightening with each passing moment. My phone vibrated then, pulling my attention from the street. A notification showed a new message in the neighborhood chat group. Has anyone seen the reports? Temblay Terrace. It's happening again. Another strangering. The word itself felt sharp and wrong, an echo of something unknown and deeply disturbing. Links started appearing in the chat, compiling videos uploaded by an anonymous user called Watcher Zero. These clips showed distant, shaky footage from other towns, always ending abruptly. The term strangering was not explained, only circulated. A new, unsettling label for an incomprehensible violence that had come to our street. My house had offered comfort. Now I felt trapped inside. The sounds outside, the distant sirens that had just passed, seemed to press against the windows. I sat in my armchair, the tablet screen a source of terror and morbid fascination, the only thing connecting me to the world beyond these walls. I was a lonely widower. Eleanor had passed 3 years ago, leaving me with hollow routines and empty spaces. I used to tend her garden or read in the quiet living room. Now the screen's glow was my constant companion, illuminating the deepening lines of worry on my face. The strangering videos were everywhere. Watcher Zero, the anonymous user, kept uploading new footage, each clip a grainy testament to something horrifying and unexplainable. People running, confused shouts, then sudden, abrupt endings. The police had issued warnings about sharing the content, but that only made it spread quicker. Every new video reduced my sense of security. I watched another one, a clip from a town 2 states over. A figure sped in the blurry distance, then a scream tore through the audio before the video cut out. I gasped. A gripping fear took hold of me. I lived alone, a fact that had once seemed peaceful but now felt vulnerable. I thought about the locked doors, the windows, the creaking floorboards at night. What would I do if someone came? The question consumed my mind, louder with each passing hour. I knew I needed to protect myself. The next day, I drove to the sporting goods store across town. The transaction was quick and almost clinical. I bought a pistol, a cold weight in my hand as the clerk explained its safety features. He gave me a box of ammunition. Carrying the bag out to my car, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. It was there now, a physical presence against the encroaching fear. News reports kept coming. More strangering incidents were being reported, not just through Watcher Zero, but on mainstream media now. The authorities were actively trying to identify and locate the content creator, stating the videos were exacerbating public panic. They called the acts incomprehensible. They showed a map with red dots spreading across the country. Each dot represented a place where someone had fallen victim. My dot was now on that map at Temblay Terrace, my street. I went home and checked the gun, loading the magazine. The metallic click, a stark sound in my quiet house. I placed it in the drawer beside my bed, waiting for whatever might come. No comfort came from this, only a deeper resolve. The house felt like a cage, every shadow a potential threat. My hand trembled as I loaded the gun again, the metal cold and unforgiving against my palm. Each creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, became an omen. I sat in the darkened living room, the television a muted distraction, but my ears strained for something else. I imagined faces, distorted and malicious, peering through the window. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by a constant churning dread that tightened my chest. Then I heard it, A guttural scream ripped through the night, close enough to make me jump. It was not a distant sound. It came from Mrs. Rodriguez's house next door. Another scream followed, shriller this time, filled with pain and terror. My blood ran cold. This was it. The strangering had finally arrived at my doorstep. My breath hitched. I grabbed the pistol from the drawer and crept toward the living room window, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the gap in the curtains, I saw a figure burst from Mrs. Rodriguez's back door, running at full speed across her yard. The figure moved with unnatural haste. It was small, but its movements were erratic and frenzied. It was heading straight for my house. My mind screamed stranger. I raised the gun. The porch light illuminated the approaching threat for a fraction of a second. I saw a face, stained red with what looked like fresh blood, contorted in a terrifying rictus. It was moving fast, too fast, its mouth open in a soundless scream. There was no time to think. It was coming for me. It was one of them. My finger squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed, deafening, tearing through the quiet night. The figure stumbled, then crumpled on my front lawn, a broken shape in the harsh light. My body trembled, but a cold resolve took over. I had stopped it. I had protected myself. I slowly walked to the front door, the gun held steady, my eyes fixed on the fallen form. I pushed the door open, the night air biting my skin. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy. I stepped onto the porch. The light from my porch cast long shadows. I approached the figure, my boots crunching on the grass. Then I stopped. The face I had seen in the fleeting moment was no longer contorted by malice. It was a child's face, pale and small. Fresh blood still stained one side, smeared from a deep cut above his eyebrow. His eyes were open, wide and unseeing, filled with a raw terror that had nothing to do with me. A thin, red trail snaked from his chest, soaking into the grass. I recognized the t-shirt, too big for him, worn and faded. It belonged to Liam, Mrs. Rodriguez's youngest boy. Liam. He had been running from Mrs. Rodriguez's house. He had been trying to get away. He had been trying to find help. The scream was not for me. The strangering was not what I thought. It was just a terrified boy escaping. The gun dropped from my numb fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The world tilted. My new job as a maintenance guy at the old building meant my phone was always in my hand, open to WhatsApp. Mr. Henderson, my manager, preferred it for all instructions, sending me detailed lists for repairs and updates on what I needed to check next. I watched the messages pop up, waiting for the familiar double blue ticks to confirm he had read my responses. Sometimes, when I sent a query about a tricky boiler or a leaking pipe, I would stare at the top of our chat window, seeing his profile picture and the tiny typing notification appear. It was the only way I knew what to do each day, following his digital instructions through the building's labyrinthine corridors. The app provided my constant, normal connection to my work. I found a loose wire behind a circuit breaker. It was sparking. This was a problem I could not handle alone. I typed a quick message to Mr. Henderson, attaching a photo of the wire. Then I sent it and watched for the typing notification to appear. It flashed, but for a split second, it did not say typing. It said, shouting at wife. My eyes widened. Then it vanished, replaced by the usual typing. I blinked, sure I had imagined the words, a trick of the light or a software glitch. A second later, the message arrived. Thanks for the heads up. That's a tricky one. Turn off the main power at the basement panel, then wrap the wire with electrical tape. I'll send an electrician over in the morning to fix it. Good work. The message was clear, helpful, and professional. I reread it, then looked at the chat window again. Nothing odd remained. It must have been a trick of my tired eyes. I dismissed the strange phrase, focusing on the instructions Henderson had given me. A few hours later, a burst pipe sent water gushing into the ground floor utility closet. I took a photo, my hands shaking from the cold water, and sent it to Mr. Henderson. I waited for the typing, notification, my memory of the earlier glitch still lingering. This time, the words flashed more clearly, lingering for a beat, strangling wife. My breath caught. The image of the words burned behind my eyes. Then, it snapped back to typing, just before his message popped up. Pipe 7C. There is a valve behind the water heater to shut it off. Use the industrial mop and bucket from the storage room on the second floor. Good quick response. The message was precise, even commendatory, and offered immediate solutions to the flood. I stared at the screen, the helpful words clashing with the terrifying phrase I had just seen. My stomach twisted with a knot of dread. The afternoon brought a series of flickering lights in the east wing. I navigated the familiar corridors, checking circuit breakers, replacing faulty bulbs. Each time I encountered a new problem, I had to message Mr. Henderson. The thought of those flashing statuses now brought a surge of sickening anticipation. I found a burnt-out ballast in a fluorescent fixture, a more complex fix. I messaged him, describing the problem and attaching another photo. The typing status appeared. This time, it did not just flash. It held for a full, horrifying second. Stark and undeniable, murdered wife. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to run from the building, but the blue ticks appeared. Then his message landed. Ballast replacement is tricky. The replacements are in the electrical closet on the third floor, marked with red tape. Be careful with the wiring. Good catch. His instructions were as detailed and helpful as always, devoid of any emotion, utterly professional. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I was new, the only maintenance guy on duty, and this job was all I had. I needed the instructions. I needed the work. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Will do, thank you." My fingers trembled as I typed, "Will do, thank you." I sent the message. I waited for his reply, a new instruction or confirmation. The blue ticks appeared. Above the typing, notification appeared again. The words formed, clear and horrifying, dealing with evil ghost of wife. They remained visible for a long moment, a stark declaration across the top of the chat. I stared at it. I expected his message to follow, as it always did, offering guidance and solutions. The words never changed. No new message appeared on the screen. The screen remained still, displaying only those words. The expected reply never arrived.